Greetings, DoD innovators. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm your host, Captain Ashley Hollingsworth, Chief of the Directors Action Group at the Department of the Air Force CDAO. As your host, I'm thrilled to be part of this month's Innovation Connect. Before diving into today's topic, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. If you're not a presenter, please keep your camera off and your microphone on mute. If someone has a live microphone while our speaker is presenting, please allow the moderators to mute that microphone. We've had a few instances lately of attendees inadvertently muting the speaker, and allowing our moderators to handle the issue will help us avoid this mistake. Also, please limit your questions to today's topic and avoid media related inquiries or commercial like promoting. Finally, your questions for the speaker can be submitted through the chat, and you can feel free to submit during the presentation. We will get them at the end. Today, we are honored to be in the presence of a true visionary and leader, Dr. William Streilein, who has made significant contributions to the field of data and AI. His expertise in leadership in machine learning, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and statistical analysis have shaped these fields and inspired countless others. Dr. Streilein is the Chief Technology Officer for the Chief Digital and AI Office of the DoD. At the DoD CDAO, he provides strategic awareness, direction, and leadership for enterprise scale data, analytical, and AI capabilities. Dr. Streilein also serves as a chair of the Artificial Intelligence for Cybersecurity and Robust Artificial Intelligence Systems Assurance academic workshops. He is a senior member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers and an active member of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. Before his current role, Dr. Streilein worked at the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, where he was a principal staff member in the Biotechnology and Human Systems Division and the leader of the Cyber Analytics and Decisions Group. Prior to MIT Lincoln Laboratory, Dr. Streilein spent 9 years working as a software engineer in the private sector. His academic journey is a testament to his dedication and passion for his field. He holds a BA degree in mathematics from Austin College, a Master of Management degree in electronic and computer music from the University of Miami, and a PhD in cognitive and neural systems from Boston University. His extensive experience and senior membership in the IEEE further underscore his deep understanding and expertise in the field of data and AI. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that very gracious introduction, and I am honored to be here today to tell you about the work we're doing at CAO in accelerating the adoption of data analytics and AI, and to tell you a little bit about maybe my background and sort of my hope for the future going forward. I look forward to your questions as I go through the briefing here and talk about our challenges and our approaches to this, as well as our strategic sort of initiatives dealing with that. So I guess we'll go on to the first slide, if you will. Great. And if you can advance one more slide there. So I like to start this presentation off with a question for the audience. In the virtual environment, it may be hard for everybody to understand, so maybe just make a mental note to yourself. If you hit the spacebar one more time, what's displayed here are two sort of statements about AI. And just to sort of get a sense for where people are, I'll read them out, but get a sense for which one you believe in. On the left, we have a statement about how amazing AI is, how it's going to transform and is already transforming society, making it making the world a better place, improving our decisions, personalizing experiences, and generally just making AI better for everybody. Maybe it's the best thing since sliced bread or printing press or the telephone, whatever you want to put in there. Or a statement like this: AI is nothing more than hype. Recent advances in AI are narrow, only incremental. You hear my tone of voice changes too when I read this. From being as intelligent as humans, progress is driven by corporate interests rather than societal benefit and rarely impact daily life. So as I said, just make a mental note to where you are on this spectrum. I deliberately came up with statements that are ends of a spectrum. Either AI is our savior, if you will, or it is just pure hype and a flash in the pan and not really going to deliver on its promises. Myself, as you can tell from my background, I am further along the left side here, I do believe that AI, which we'll have a definition for in a second, has the ability and is already transforming society. I do believe that companies see the benefit and financial return in it. So that's a good thing because it means people have a reason to explore it. But I also think that it is going to help us solve some of the really wicked problems that are plaguing us. And it actually already has done that as well. So I'm very, very bullish on it. But I do also think that there are risks, and we'll talk about that. Part of our strategy, actually, at CDAO is to address that, to think about how amazing AI is, but also what we need to do to leverage it responsibly. That's probably the key word, responsible AI. All right, so let's go to the next slide. I found this chart on the web a couple of months ago, and I really like it. I can't take credit for it, but I've incorporated it into my briefings because I think it captures, in a nutshell, sort of the history of AI as a term and where we are now, and perhaps maybe it'll give us a sense of where we're going in the future to some extent. There's up and downs. That's sort of the first thing you notice about it. And I like to make two or three points about this that are key. First is that roller coaster ride. You can see that the line that we're following here, the main point of the slide is to track that line. It goes up, it goes down into what are called winters. I'll explain what those are. And now we're on this trajectory taking us up to who knows where. The first thing is that dimension, the Y dimension, the vertical dimension is not capability, excuse me, it's popularity. So the perception about AI is in many ways as important as its actual capability, because perception, especially in today's day and age, affects how people adopt capability, how they are interested in it, how they go and get degrees in it, if you will, or adopt it into their workflows. And here at CDAO, perception is absolutely critical to our job, our success of getting AI to be adopted. So we've got to be aware of people's perception of it. A lot of what we do is to demystify, dispel the hype, if you will, and show the capability for what it really is. In my case, I believe it's transformational, but it's done responsibly. It can be really, really important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is those dips that I mentioned before are relevant. Those are what's known as the AI winters. And those happened, for instance, one happened around the 1970s when the original promise, when the term was coined, those algorithms did replicate some capabilities that we thought, they were algorithmic in general, that we thought would be able to solve really large-scale decision problems. Never panned out for a number of reasons. But because of that, the popularity went down. Ergo, the funding that came actually from the government went down. Then we had an era in the 80s where expert systems, more symbolic type reasoning was developed. Again, great capabilities were demonstrated, but not enough to sort of take over the world, if you will. And again, funding dried up. And now we're in an era boosted by incredible computational capabilities as well as access to data brought about by things like IoT, and of course, internet has enabled us to connect systems together where we have the necessary ingredients to really experiment with the algorithms and show their value. Thus, we are here on this grand path of acceleration. And the third thing I'd like to point out is all of the notable events that have happened over time. Well, this is relevant to our job at CAO because you can see those represent pace of innovation, from things like IBM Watson being able to win at Jeopardy to AlphaGo, being able to beat the best players, and now it's used to actually train players with novel solutions to board configurations. Things like AlphaFold solving really, really wicked problems in understanding how 3D proteins are formed from just the sequence, and on and on. And now we're in, obviously, an era of generative AI. The narrow AI hasn't gone away, but the generative AI capabilities have taken over a lot of our focus. And I think rightly so, because they represent a real step change in function and capability that we can learn how to take advantage of. So those are the main points that I wanted to get from this. It's been a 75-year journey or so, and there's a lot more to be done. But those have real relevance on our job here at CDAO. If we go to the next slide, the point is to show you that we're not the only ones who recognize the promise of AI. It's a competitive environment, which is another way to say that our adversaries are leveraging the capability, if you will, or plan to and promise to, as indicated by these headlines, which I've grabbed from the news. And so that kind of sets the context for our work here at CDAO and, of course, in support of the Department of Defense. If you hit the space bar, I recently added another headline, and that's related to large language models, which obviously burst onto the scenes in November of 2022. And they have really shifted the landscape about AI. The fact that you can have a conversation with an algorithm, if you will, about data that you've trained it on, changes the way that people think about AI, about what it means for our workflows. As I said, it doesn't mean we aren't going to use narrow AI, but it means that we can imagine new ways in which we could leverage this capability to learn from data. But there is a dark side, and that is because they can speak, we've added a new vulnerability to the system, and that's people. People were always a vulnerability. If you know about cyber work, which you heard in my background, I had done some work there. The risks of social engineering are always present, but now we have a risk, you might say, from the cognitive side, where you might be able to be convinced by an algorithm, by a large language model that tells you something. So responsible application of AI now includes making sure that the human is aware of what they're interfacing with and how to make sure, verify, and validate the output. Okay, if we go to the next slide, being an academic at heart, I like to simplify things and present them in sort of graphical format. This is a notional graph, but it represents two dimensions that I think are relevant for our task here at CDAO regarding adoption. The first is the x-axis or horizontal axis. It's the space of adoption that CDAO and the DoD is concerned about, from enterprise through operations and finally to warfighting. And then along the y-axis or the vertical dimension, we have some terms that I've pulled out to sort of capture gradations of adoption from nascent through demonstrated, common, ubiquitous, and finally integral. If you hit the space bar, the question that I'm trying to illustrate here is, where do we want to go? If you assess our current adoption frontier, how far we've moved with AI, as what I've depicted here, which I think is still a relatively fair assessment, do we want the whole space to be green or AI enabled? Or are we okay with not all of it, but relevant parts? The reason I assessed things like this is because generally in the enterprise, you have access to the computing, data, storage, the tools that you need to leverage AI. And additionally, the problems that you may be applying it to are pretty well known. Things like back office functions, HR functions, budgetary functions. When you go to the right near warfighting, things become a lot less well described, understood. And so the ability to apply it in a holistic or enterprise way becomes much more challenging. If you hit the spacebar one more time, it illustrates the fact that we aren't really trying to just put AI everywhere in everybody's pocket. We're trying to apply AI where it matters most, and that is with respect to where we believe the adversary's AI adoption frontier is so that we can have a competitive capability. Decision advantage is something we often use to describe this, but we want to remain capable and competent and competitive with our adversaries and dominate where we need to. So let's go to the next slide. Having said that, that's what we want to do in moving this purple crayon, if you will, or the adoption frontier up and to the right, we right off the bat recognize that there are impediments to that. I've mentioned a couple of them just sort of in passing about the vulnerabilities and the new risks there, but they expand beyond that. If you hit the spacebar, they include things like the inaccessibility of the government's data. I mentioned that data is key to developing AI. And although the department has a lot of it, it is not well under control. It isn't necessarily accessible for a number of reasons to everybody that needs it to develop algorithms. These can be policy or cultural impediments. They can, of course, be technical impediments. Other impediments include the lack of AI trust or knowledge in the capability. And that's something we really work on, and not necessarily to dismiss AI in any way, but to demystify it so people can think about it logically, rationally when they're considering bringing it in. And so we have a lot of work to help with that. There are acquisition challenges with AI, as indicated in that roller coaster chart, if you will. The pace of innovation is so fast that we can't wait for normal FAR type acquisitions to bring a monolithic system in. We have to be much more rapid. We also have challenges related to the fragmentation or fragmented capabilities that do get developed across the department. If we're to work together in a joint way, we need to be able to bridge that. And so silos are an impediment. And then finally, as indicated by the height of that area under the curve there, the technical domain challenges are just really hard. We don't even know all of the things that we're going to see in a dynamic war environment. So those represent a significant challenge. However, CDAO, which was formed about 2 years ago from the Joint AI Center, the Chief Data Office, the Havana Business and Analytics Platform, and finally Defense Digital Services, has been created with a number of tools that we can use and help muster to help push back against these impediments. If you hit the space bar, they're listed here, and they include the ability to develop policy and strategy that helps to break down barriers related to inaccessibility of data. We promote data patterns as opposed to necessarily data standards. It's a softer word and suggests that there are ways to represent the data that enable others to see it and understand it, and also promote sharing. Responsible AI is a key tenet of the way that we're approaching the adoption of AI. And so we have toolkits which support the words that are in the memo for a responsible AI and enable people to make actual quantitative assessments about how responsible they are being in applying AI. We also have best practices documented for human machine teaming and are working really hard to develop and have already released several courses at various echelons across the department to educate people and raise their AI literacy. From the acquisition challenge standpoint, I have a slide later on this, but we're working on a number of vehicles that enable modern, agile acquisition of these capabilities, probably through prototypes that can have real operational impact, but still get us to see the capability and then move from there to something more sustained. We're focusing on the provision of enterprise solutions and enterprise capabilities that work against the silos and fragmentation that's out there, so that we know that there's some sort of standardization and there's certainly interoperability that allow us to leverage all of the individual and disparate capabilities. And then finally, our organization is set up with an algorithmic warfare directorate specifically focused on difficult problems that the warfighter addresses in various domains: maritime, land or air or space, and even cyber. And the ability to develop capabilities specific for that help us address those technical domain challenges. So that's a lot of work to do. We obviously need a strategy. And so we released a strategy last November, which in some senses is a little bit of an anti-strategy, is in that it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what to do. It focuses more on how you're going to do it or how we're going to help the department adopt AI. So if you go to the next slide, I brought in a couple of screenshots from that strategy, which I'd like to focus on. The first is an approach that we're adopting, which industry has leveraged for a long time in the development of software, and that is an agile approach. And what agility means here is that you are frequently learning from what you're doing. You're constantly checking to make sure that what you're doing is appropriate. You're incorporating feedback, and you have more of a product orientation to what the capabilities are that you're delivering. This is a real departure from previous sort of assessments of what needs to be done for adoption. And the key point here is that rather than thinking about things as strategic assets, whether they're data, which those two words are often put together, data is a strategic asset, we think of data, for instance, as a product. And what that means is that the holder or the provider of that data doesn't see the value unless there's a customer. That sort of changes the narrative around data from something that people want to hoard to something that people benefit and get credit for sharing, because if they share it, somebody's using it and is making maybe a better decision based on it. But that product orientation is core throughout everything that we do, whether it's data that we're promoting or whether it's AI capabilities or some services that support the development of AI capabilities. So speed comes from this agile approach because it means you can quickly adapt. We definitely want to learn, and surrounding it as well are these tenets of responsibility, that we're cognizant of what we're doing. We're adhering to the 5 tenets of the ethical principles of AI, and we're making sure that when we apply it, we're thinking about those decision advantage outcomes, which are listed here on the right. At a high level, these, of course, can be teased out to more specific things, but we want better battle space awareness by leveraging AI and adopting it at scale. We want the ability to adaptively do force planning and then apply it. Our kill chains, we want to be more faster, more precise, and resilient to incursions or impediments. Our efficient enterprise business operations have already taken great steps toward that. Advana is an example of how that's being used across the department, specifically in OSD, but elsewhere as well, to provide decision advantage for senior leaders. And then finally, we need resilience, sustainment, and support. So these are the main decision advantage outcomes, which we articulate are the benefits of leveraging AI. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about a framework that we call the AI hierarchy of needs. I think of it a little bit like the food pyramid for AI. I grew up in the 70s, and so the food pyramid was something that it was supposed to help me understand my caloric intake and where I should get my calories from. I don't know if it always worked, but we certainly want people to follow this DoD hierarchy of needs for AI. What it embodies for me as an AI researcher and someone who's leveraged AI throughout my career is it calls out the fact that you really can't do AI without data. And so that's the foundation of it. When you have your data under control and understood, you can begin to think about how it can bring value to your mission spaces. But you do that responsibly. It's not that we think we're going to get all of the department's data in order first, and then we're going to start applying AI. It's actually more of an iterative process. I like to think about the first thing you do is help people understand what AI can do for your workflow, and then you start thinking about the data. Where is the data that's going to provide you value, and is it AI ready, if you will? Does it enable your algorithms to work? Is it relevant to what you're asking it what the algorithm to learn from? And do you have sufficient quantity? One of the major advances that happened for those who are in the field or remember was the ImageNet data set that was created that really gave a boost to computer vision algorithms. Before that, there were certainly examples of computer vision algorithms doing good things, but in order to reach human parity of recognizing objects or recognizing content and imagery, and then even surpassing them, that was only enabled when there was enough data. And so that's really what we're focusing on here. And in our first efforts, we're really sort of emphasizing the need to think first about data when you're thinking about how AI can be applied. So around this hierarchy of needs, we have a number of goals as well, a number of activities, some of which have been mentioned in my previous chart about the movement of that adoption frontier, but they relate to starting in the sort of counterclockwise fashion around 10 o'clock. We want to strengthen governance and remove policy barriers so that we can get access to data and other systems we need. We are, at CDAO, we're focused on providing enterprise business solutions, but also impacting the joint warfighting capability through the joint services and also, the joint staff and the combatant commands. We want to improve foundational data management, and so you'll see me talk about that in a little bit. Continuing on, I mentioned our efforts to expand digital talent within the department, and we're spearheading 11 new career paths within the department that acknowledge the roles of data scientist and AI engineer, among others, that are integral and critical to enabling and maintaining a transformed department. The ecosystem is really important to me in particular, and so I have my next slide will go into that a little bit, but it shows how this is going to be a partnership. It's not all going to be done within the DoD, and we have to rely upon where the innovation is happening, and that's in industry and at service labs and places like that. And then because we know we can't build one system or one AI to rule them all, or even one environment to rule them all, we have to invest in interoperable and federated infrastructure. So I like this hierarchy of needs because it helps you understand and focus on the key things that you need to do, as well as the enablers that will make that happen. Now let's go to the next slide. This is a depiction of an ecosystem that really supports the DoD's AI goals as depicted through our strategy. You'll notice if you had any experience with AI in the past or now, you've heard the term machine learning ops or ML ops, and it's an extension of the DevSecOps construct to describe how software is developed, tested, and then monitored in operations to iteratively improve. The same idea applies to ML ops, in which you're developing a capability, but monitoring it and then improving it. In this depiction, we can see at least one loop here in that ML ops, the one which capability is developed, encompasses not only the DoD, but includes innovation, the innovation spaces, and then importantly, the trusted partners in the middle. So I drew it this way because it's an acknowledgement of the fact that the DoD, especially now and under the timelines that we are trying to accelerate this capability cannot possibly turn itself into a startup that is developing AI capabilities, in any kind of way to meet the timeline. So we have to rely upon innovation that's out there, but we need to do it in a responsible way. And so, as depicted here, the role of the DoD, if we start, we're going to go clockwise this time around the loop, but if we start around 5:30 or 5 o'clock, we can see that the DoD can start by really understanding its mission, understanding how we want the digital and AI capabilities to make impact. And from there, because we own the data that is relevant to our missions, we can get that data ready to go. We can make it AI ready. We can label it, annotate it. We can collect sufficient quantity and make it available as we move around the loop to those innovation spaces where they can develop it. Now, this is a high-level notional sort of representation, but it is exactly what has happened and the lessons that we've learned from the MAVEN program, where mission data in the form of computer vision imagery has been made available to multiple industry partners to develop computer vision models. That competitive model development is key because it means we're not doing competition before we award and then choosing one vendor. We're bringing multiple vendors on to develop models. And then through the course of the program execution, actually at 90-day intervals, the capabilities are sort of, we have a bake-off across them, and the best model wins until the next 90 days. And so in this way, this allows the DoD to take advantage of the best models within the program and also moves all of the participants in the model development forward. Those models are then put through assurance processes, test and evaluation, validation, and verification to be brought back into operational settings where they're monitoring and continuing to go on. In calling out the different tiers here, I wanted to be specific and say, that this doesn't mean the DoD won't innovate. They certainly will, but large-scale innovation on AI has happened out in the industry, and we need to figure out a pipeline such as this is that way for it to happen. And we can rely upon our trusted partners such as FFRDCs and UARCs to help us understand how to assure, how to make that translation between what AI capabilities are provided and what the DoD mission is. If we go to the next slide, we have a layout of what is relevant for enabling the data to be used across the department. In support of that ecosystem is this notion of a data mesh. It's a sort of the next it's the evolution of sort of data engineering constructs from a data lake to a data fabric. The data mesh idea actually suits DoD's needs very well. The main constructs of it, or main pillars of it, are that the data stays where it is. You're not trying to move it all over the place to be in one central location. What you do share, though, is metadata that allows that data to be discovered and then accessed in a self-service way from a catalog. Additionally, the data mesh leverages federated computational governance, meaning that we're not going to specify exactly how all the data must be formatted, just that it must be formatted, and the formats must have a certain minimum set of metadata to describe them. And then the last part of the data mesh really speaks to data as a product. By incorporating all four of those pillars of the data mesh construct, we think that this really aligns well with what the DoD needs to create to enable an ecosystem of commercial solutions to be built on top of this. As this slide depicts, the government's role here is to define that data mesh with services that enable us to access the data, find it and access it, and so on. There's governance so that we are sure of how the policies surrounding that access are leveraged, and also as well defining security that's relevant related to like classification, identity, and access. But there's a lot of space for input from industry as well as the development of capabilities that enable the mesh to be instantiated, including but not limited to applications that are built on that data, algorithms and models that help us understand it, APIs for access, dashboards, visualization, and so on. So this is absolutely core to our construct. The mesh, just like its data is the bottom of the AI hierarchy of needs, the data mesh is the core to how we're enabling adoption across the department. The next slide, I just wanted to sort of push up or show the ethical principles of AI. Many of you are probably aware of them already. I just wanted to say, they are responsibility, equitability, traceability, reliability, and governability. What I will say is that, in rereading these, they're actually meant for the human, the user who is trying to apply AI. They don't speak too much to, the capability. It just means that, in our application of AI, we as engineers, we as stakeholders, we as program managers have to follow these tenets. We're the ones that are responsible, if you will, for making sure that AI is applied ethically. And one of the main ways we can do that is through our AI assurance and T&E capabilities. And so if you go to the next slide, there's a quick sort of layout of our activities there. Our T&E processes are not focused only on the algorithm, which of course is important, but they also involve testing and evaluating how capability gets integrated within the system, the human-machine team interface, which continues to be probably the most important part of how an AI is leveraged, and then also the integration of the capability within an operational environment. We do integrity assessments. There are confidence assessments that help us calibrate trust, if you will. I'll just pause there for a second. We don't like to use the word trust to say whether or not we will use a system, an AI system. Instead, we like to use terms like justified confidence, which indicate that we've done quantitative assessment, built enough evidence around our statements about the algorithm, and then have confidence to move forward with it in an operational setting. Robustness refers to how the algorithm or system, in the context of a workflow, can react and survive when perturbations happen, whether they're from natural causes like blurriness in a camera or a foggy day if you're doing computer vision, or to adversarial transformations that could happen. And then that adversarial aspect is really captured in resilience. And what's listed here are some of the areas of interest that we have been working on and continue to look into related to evaluating and testing these systems. If we go to the next slide, I mentioned previously a little bit about our acquisition ecosystem. This is really geared towards accelerating how quickly we can get capabilities in, test them out, try them within an operational environment, and see how we need to alter them and what kind of impact they can have. Each one of these blue boxes here represents a different vehicle that folks within the DoD can leverage to bring capability in. I'll start with Tradewind. TradewindAI.com is how you get to this portal, and it's really a site where vendors can quickly put a 5-minute video of their solution up for viewing. On the DoD side, you can do a keyword search to find vendors who are providing capabilities of relevance. Excuse me. And then you can go from there. In as little as, I've heard 3 days, you can get somebody on contract to provide a capability to you. That's groundbreaking. You would never see something like that within sort of the FAR mechanisms. Moving around, we have the digital proving ground actually supports Tradewind. That's actually where the videos are posted there. DRAID is a mechanism right now to bring in data that meets the AI readiness criteria that are specified. We've got a blanket purchase agreement for test and evaluation capabilities. Moving around the circle, Talent 2.0 helps us bring in AI capable individuals across the whole life cycle to support operations and back office functions. And then the solutions marketplace is an environment, and it's a repository for understanding what vendors are able to provide to you, and so on and so on. So really, with this set of acquisition vehicles, we're hoping, and we are already starting to change the thinking around how capabilities can be brought in for demonstration, for actual operational impact, and then eventual sustainment. It's really important to have mechanisms like this because the field is changing so quickly, and we can't be waiting around for requirements that might never come and are out of date by the time the capability is ready. If we go to the next slide, there's a brief description of what we're calling scaffolding. Scaffolding refers to the systems and services, technical and non-technical, that support MLOps pipelines like I depicted in my ecosystem picture to be instantiated across the department. They're technical and non-technical. What I mean by that is that certainly there are technical services that we're providing through scaffolding, things like data labeling services, things like DevSecOps or MLOps environments and containerization, instrumentation, and then even T&E. But there are other services that are as important and as critical and can be as much of an impediment to bringing AI in, related to acquisitions, related to policy, authority to operate, and things like that. The bottom one, AI consulting, is kind of a novel service that refers to the development of playbooks that help people understand what it means to take the AI journey. We've got a first version of that we're working on right now. And the purpose of it is to help people, once they've started to ask the question or gotten the direction from their commanding officer, bring AI in to help us with their mission, they have a playbook they can follow that helps them ask the right questions, connect with the right services that could bring the capability in, and really educate and be responsible about it. If we go to the next slide, this is a tag back to that one extra headline that I put back there on my original competitive slide about large language models. As you are probably aware, about a year ago, Task Force Lima was established to help us really understand what generative AI means for the department. And I wanted to sort of footstop some of these goals here. You know, Task Force Lima's goal is to accelerate the application of promising generative AI initiatives and solutions, things like large language models across the department. But we need to do that in a way that is responsible. This new technology that LLMs represent certainly is impressive. Everything on the Task Force Lima slide, we want to federate solutions to this. We want to federate across different disparate parts of the department, so we're in coordination here. We want to provide guidance so that people know what to do. And we're working on several aspects of that, including developing evaluation systems and mechanisms for understanding how the capability can be brought to the department. If you go to the next slide, this is the way that we're sort of thinking about it. There's two dimensions here that are relevant. Along the vertical axis is this notion of scale. And I use that to describe the complexity that's associated with a problem for which you might want to leverage the AI capability. And then the other dimension is consequence, and that is the sort of the impact of the use case that you're trying to apply the LLM solution to. Now, there's a little bit of a nuance here. I actually have refined this a little bit to say that the consequence is not necessarily the use case, because they're all important in the DoD. Some maybe have timescales that are different than others. It's really about the consequence of an LLM output being incorrect that matters here. And so with those sort of dimensions, this is how we're sort of framing the assessment of different use cases. In cases where the scale is high, where the definite value of leveraging an automated solution is apparent, we're in the upper left, and the consequence is low. Excuse me. We're in the upper left, and this is an ideal place for experimentation. A lot of the solutions here we might think of as, or use cases here might be the back office use cases where we're preparing documents, and there's a lot of opportunity for human inspection and verification. By comparison, a place where there's low scale, maybe a one-off sort of event that happens, and the consequence is extremely high for a bad output from an LLM, you might be in the bottom right. And this is better suited even now for humans at this time. The capability, I think, as we all know, is still prone to hallucinations. And we still need to have a human in the loop verifying the output. That's basically just where we are. But we're developing solutions or ways to think about it so that workflows can be updated to handle this sort of aspect. And so one of the main things we're doing, if we go to the next slide, is working with industry, working with the scientific community, develop a maturity model. We actually had a whole working session day at our symposium, which was held in February, to look into this notion of a maturity model. We're borrowing the same sort of levels that you may be familiar with in autonomous driving, where 5 or 6 levels indicated level of autonomy in an autonomous driving system. The lowest levels have no autonomy, kind of like my car, up to the highest levels where you can just specify a destination and the car will take you there. In the middle, you're indicating other aspects of driving that the system will take over for you, such as staying in your lane, avoiding obstacles, maybe even passing somebody or parking. The important thing that's there, sort of implicit in those levels, is that there's a human able to pick up the slack for anything the car is not able to do. And that's the same thing we want to do with this maturity model. We want to say that the workflow has to be executed, and the LLM can help you get there. And the maturity model will help you understand how much of that workflow the human will have to pick up the slack for. That's basically, in a nutshell, what it is. Our goal there is to release this maturity model by the end of June. It'll be a working maturity model with metrics that can be applied to LLM systems, as well as data sets that are relevant to the DoD. And the goal is that from this, not only will stakeholders understand what it means when they think about bringing AI in or LLMs in, but it also helps them understand where vendors are in providing their capability. Hype is still common across the community, and this will help us understand, engage where the systems actually are with a quantitative measure. I think that's the end of my comments here today, the end of my slides. Apologies for the little snafu there with the video that I lost on my side, but I'm glad we're back up. In summary, I'd just like to say it's clear we're in a competitive race with facing adversaries. The adoption of AI requires responsible agility based on a hierarchy of needs and our other tenets of our strategy. Our technology needs that we've asked industry to develop support this notion of the digital ecosystem, and scaffolding and data mesh services are core to that. And we seek partnership across the department as we develop this campaign of learning. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Streilein, for that presentation. Very informative. And we actually have a few questions posted in the chat. So we'll start with the first one from Mr. Garth. Is there any DoD guidance on how to establish a data catalog for multiple integrated workflows in the tactical to CJTF level of command?
That's a great question. I can get you more information on that. I don't know anything specifically about that, but I know that through our efforts working with other combatant commands and working on the CJAD C2 capability, which we're responsible for developing the data integration layer, situations like this have been encountered, and we've developed sort of best practices for how people organize their data to support closing loops between sensors and effectors. I'd be glad to get you more information on that.
All right, and on to the second question from Kevin McHugh. How do you see the increase of speed and asset creation that Gen AI promises and seems to be delivering versus the human organization's ability to maintain decision control over evolving situations? Said another way, the OODA loop is getting much smaller. What do we do when it's smaller than the human's ability to absorb and respond?
That's a great question. I would say one place you can look for where this is already happening is in the cyber domain, and that is that the OODA loop in the cyber domain has been faster than humans can do for a while. There was a program from DARPA, I think the Cyber Challenge, I think of what it was called, like 5 or 6 years ago. They didn't all necessarily use AI, but they definitely demonstrated that automation can help in both defending against threats and also making them on the fly. It's a great question, because I also agree that the OODA loop will continue to get smaller. I like that construct for understanding what it means to be competitive and how we need to be executing that faster than our adversaries. I think our ability to turn things over to machines for autonomy is absolutely critical. I believe the future is autonomy. And I don't mean, just that we'll have drones flying everywhere. I just mean that things move so quickly, especially in competition, that we will have to rely upon systems to help us understand what's there and respond. We have to do it responsibly. We have to do it ethically. And the ability to do that comes from having things like justified confidence, having the ability to trust, I'll use that word, that the systems are responding appropriately. But it also means that we are monitoring them and are able to ensure that going forward and can correct it when it doesn't do what we need to do. Hope that answered your question.
Great, thank you. Third question from Joe. Which organizations across the DoD are participating in Task Force Lima?
Well, CDAO is leading the task force, but we have representation from all of the PSAs, and I think I mean, I don't know how many, there's so many organizations that are participating in Task Force Lima that attend our bi-weekly meetings, our senior leadership meetings to describe what's going on. We see their participation in a number of ways. We released a request, a call for use cases, and received over 225 use cases. They continue to come in that are describing people's intended uses for or current uses of LLMs. Again, we're not the gatekeeper for LLMs, but people look to us to help them understand what they mean and how they can be used responsibly. But from those 220 use cases, we've been able to bin them, to put them into buckets of activity. I can tell you that the top 3 use case buckets, if you will, are, as you can imagine, administrative tasks, sort of back office things like filling out forms, providing summaries to meetings, that kind of stuff. Intelligence analysis is a really great one as well, because if you think about that workflow, it already is dealing with probabilistic statements that might come from various intelligence sources. So the ability to vet them and then provide a product that is based on that is key and well suited to a large language model, which whose output you should be viewing with probability. And then the third use case was in helping with information technology work. And dealing with data there. Things come in so quickly that that's very useful. So I guess in summary, maybe, I don't know if I can say every organization is, but we've got many organizations that are participating. R&E here in the building, R&E, CIO, and we've got CDAOs and other components throughout the department. All the combatant commands are supporting it as well. Thank you.
Also from Kevin McHugh, is it possible to become involved with the LLM maturity model work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just send me a note, and glad to have you on board. So I mentioned the fact that we are going to be releasing version 1 by the end of June. We are working right now on a white paper describing the structure of that maturity model, and are going to be releasing that to the community. Glad to send it to you for review and feedback. And then based on input that we get from that release, we're going to incorporate it and then instantiate it as a working capability. I'll give you a little more feel for that maturity model. It's going to consist of a set of levels that are defined in plain English for what the LLM can do within a workflow and what the human needs to do. It'll consist of a set of data sets that the DoD is concerned about. Obviously, nothing, not too specific, but relevant things like planning documents, things like policy, maybe some technical ones as well. And then a core set of metrics that we think are relevant enough to assessing the capability and enabling someone to understand how much they're going to have to pick up the slack for the LLM when they incorporate it. The final piece of the maturity model will be a process by which somebody thinks about where their LLM is that they're intending to use and how they then bring that into their workflow. What are the steps they have to think through? Do they have enough people? Do they have their data in order? How are they going to use it? What's the architecture, RAG, or something like that? Glad to have the help. Thank you.
And from Michael Lewis, you mentioned ethical use. Adversaries likely won't be constrained by that requirement. So, how do we overcome that disparity?
That's a great question. I don't know exactly the answer, but I like thinking about that. The reason is that I think it's critical that we do have ethical principles, because that's the basis for our country among, rules-based society. I will say that there's a couple of ways that I tend to think about this. First is there are advantages in leveraging it in an environment where you don't have constraints. When I say it, I mean like just boldly going forward. Sort of that statement. Fortune favors the bold. It's certainly the case that if you're willing to, if you don't really care and you just keep trying things, eventually you're going to find something that's really groundbreaking. And so, our adversaries may not have those constraints that keep them from trying things. But that's why we want to incorporate, and you'll see that core to our strategy, this notion of experimentation. We actually think, and I've often said, responsibility is more than just ethical and traceability and those other 5 terms. It's actually to be responsible with AI, you have to experiment. You have to try it out. I won't say no, because as soon as I say no, I'll be wrong. But there are rare cases where an AI model has been applied and used without further training. That means it's always customized. And if it's always customized, that means you're experimenting with it to learn how it can be best applied. So that's how we're sort of thinking about the fact that there are places where ethical concerns don't come in. We want to include, in an ethical and responsible way, experimentation in our workflows for understanding them. The second thing I'll say is that by experimenting, by applying principles of responsible AI, by understanding, and I mentioned this briefly, adversarial training to models, which is one way to sort of prepare your model for robustness in a changing environment. You learn about the model, you learn about its weaknesses and can prepare it for that. And you also learn about the model that you learn things about the model that you could use in a different context. If you're going forward without sort of thinking things through, and I'm sort of describing it simply as with wild abandon, you might not recognize the weaknesses the models have. It's a great question. It's a challenge that we have. But I think that we also want to share what's learned across the department, so that if one section, one department, one command learns something in operating or experimenting with an AI capability, the lessons learned can be shared so that we can all benefit. Thank you.
All right. And the last question that we have so far in the chat is from Greg Bim. If we have specialized data ops and ML ops hardware and software in-house that can outperform in the compute file, IO, and cost over AWS government cloud, where should a small business go for something like this? We are fine giving the rights to the government, no vendor lock, but don't know contracting very well. We're a technologist company and lack contracting knowledge. Hearing 3-day turnaround to fund a prototype sounds incredible. Would this be appropriate there, or do you have another recommendation for this?
That's a great question. I don't know how to answer that one with enough specificity to necessarily help you out. I think first, I applaud you for having new thoughts for bringing capability in. And I'd like to drop the name of my compatriot over in the acquisitions department. Her name is Bonnie Evangelista, and I can connect you with her. He'll be able to tell you, give you a much better answer to your question about what's the right approach to bring the capability in. The enterprise services that we provide are not meant to be the only way that we want people to bring things in. We want people to be creative. It's mostly that people are thinking about it and are sort of aware of the options, have more than one option when they bring things in. But I'll definitely, thank you for that, Greg. I'll definitely connect you with Bonnie.
Wonderful. And I'm going to pause for a few seconds just in case there's a last second question or someone had some hesitation before we end. Oh, and we do have one from Karen Wright. Are there plans to build in continued security measures for enterprise data sets such as procurement data and platforms such as Advana? Data gathered through AI and made available to AF innovators can be powerful, but I realize there's a level of caution that needs to be maintained.
Absolutely. One of the things about Advana as a platform, it's demonstrated, the power of bringing data together into an environment where you can build analytics. It has some of the attributes that I think we want to sort of move away from in the sense of centralizing data, and we're working to make that more of an accessible catalog. But that requires, like you said, continued and different security measures. When you can control everything inside of your environment, once you're inside, you can sort of do anything you want, if you will. But that creates a delay in getting access in the first place. It can take some time to get in. And so with the notion of the data mesh, we want it to be as lightweight as possible, which suggests we have to do things like sort of zero trust principles that allow us to validate and verify more like in time, real time with people that need access to the system. We are looking into other mechanisms that enable people to specify attributes, metadata about the data first before the process of gaining access is provided. So one of the concepts we're thinking about sort of built on the mesh is this notion of a marketplace that allows data product providers of all shapes, all sizes, to connect with vendors or even consumers of that data of varying security access capabilities. That's going to be needed in order to let the marketplace take hold, and it will require a much more fine-grained understanding of access, whether attribute-based and roles-based as well. That's a great question. And we're continuing to look at that. We're going to build that into the mesh as we move forward. Thank you.
Awesome. I did want to second Mr. Terry Halverson's thank you, his former DoD CIO. He says, great overview of the issues, challenges, and reality of AI and data today. He also agrees that autonomy is where we need to move with a defined governance model. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I really like the questions that have come in. Again, sorry for the video snafu there, but it was all on my side. It's a great opportunity. Thank you.
No problem at all. Yes, a virtual round of applause, and we know that you're just as busy, so we thank you for your time, just as busy as we are over here at DAF CDAO. So we appreciate it again. And we want to thank everyone here today for joining March Innovation Connect. We're grateful for your continued support of DoD innovators and the DAF CDAO. We have several pioneering projects underway and are eager to spotlight each speaker. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which will be announced soon. Approved videos of our past events are available on the Department of the Air Force CDAO YouTube page. As always, we welcome your recommendations for future Innovation Connect topics to our DAF CDAO communications mailbox. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again.